Fualcha, a Harjagil. This is episode 55 of the Rebel Matters podcast, and the first episode in a few weeks because I've been up and down the country recording chats with people, as well as being busy with a few of the other projects that I'm involved in at the minute, including bringing the Palestine Community Gym project onto the next level, working on the business side of things with Ackley, and I've also been at a few of the kneecap gigs because they are currently on the road. I was up at their gig in the Academy last Thursday night in Dublin, which was an absolutely class night, and as it happens they have a new track out called Get Your Brits Out today. It's on YouTube and it's going to be coming out on Spotify soon, so go and check that out if you want to. Today's episode of the podcast was actually scheduled to be coming out in a few weeks. It's a chat that I recorded last week with Calvin James Sweeney up in Dublin. Calvin and his brother Andy set up the Scoop Foundation, which is an organisation that kind of just does good stuff for people all around the world. And one of the projects the Scoop Foundation have is called Syrias Vibes, and I think I've mentioned this on the podcast before because I was over at their Christmas party in London last year, which was the first time that myself and Calvin got chatting, and I've been wanting to do a podcast with them ever since because the stuff that they're doing is really worthwhile and very positive. And Calvin's been over and back from Syria 18 times, so it was great to sit down and get to chat with him up in Dublin while I was up there going to the kneecap gig last week. And the reason that I've brought this podcast episode forward is because Syria is currently under attack by Turkey, and I'm no expert in the ins and outs of the political situation in Syria, which is one of the reasons why I wanted to speak to Calvin in the first place. But from my basic understanding of things, what's after happening is that the Kurdish fighters in northern Syria have been fighting against ISIS with the backing of the American military, soldiers on the ground and in the air as well. And just this week, Donald Trump made some kind of sordid deal with the Turkish Prime Minister that basically threw the American alliance with the Kurdish fighters in Syria into the bin and gave Turkey a free rein to invade Syria and attack the Kurdish fighters that the Americans have been fighting with to defeat ISIS. And it's clear that they've kind of been thrown under the bus, and I don't know what the ins and outs of the deal is that America have made with Turkey, but I'm sure it's got something to do with greed or some sort of economic advancement on the part of America and Turkey. But essentially what's happening at the minute is that the Turks are bombing and attacking the absolute living shit out of Syria, and they've been left to fend for themselves, and a lot of innocent people are dying from it and are going to die from it. And I thought that it was important to bring this episode forward just to bring a little bit more awareness to this whole situation, and also to give people the opportunity to try and speak out about what's happening here, because regardless of your understanding and how deep the understanding of the sort of world politics and things that are going on in Syria and that part of the world is, it's a tragedy that innocent people are going to be killed, and that people who've been trying to form some shape of a life for themselves in the midst of an ongoing conflict are just thrown into the fire again just because of some deal that Donald Trump has decided to make with the Turkish Prime Minister. So I think that the chat here with Calvin will do a lot more to explain what kind of work that the Scoop Foundation do and that the Syrias 5 project is involved in, what kind of work that he's been doing, and what the situation on the ground is like out there. And it also gives you a place to go to find out more about what's happening out there. You can go to the Scoop Foundation's website, which is scoopfoundation.org. They're on Facebook under Scoop Foundation, and you can also follow Calvin and the Syrias Vibes project on Instagram. It's at Syrias Vibes, SYRISVIBES. And to be honest, it's pretty depressing putting this podcast episode out, because it's all very well for us sitting over here listening to podcasts and being at quite a bit of a distance away from the absolute nightmare and living hell that's happening for people right now at this very moment in time. And but at least there are people out there who are bringing awareness to the situation, and there are things that we can all do. The Scoop Foundation have set up a fundraiser for the Syrian Kurds, and the link to that can be got on the Scoop Foundation website and also the Scoop Foundation Facebook page. They've got a target of €10,000. There's €8,621 donated as I am recording this, so go over there and give a wee donation and do something positive to help this absolute disaster of a situation. Before we get stuck into the chat with Calvin, I just want to make you aware that I will be doing a live podcast as part of the Cork Podcast Festival. It's the first time that this festival has been happening, and I'm going to be doing a live podcast on the 13th of October, which is Sunday at 2:30 in the Spalbeen Fannock, and that's a free event. There's actually loads of free events as part of this podcast festival, and you can go to the Cork Podcast Festival.com. I think that the website is, let me just check it here, Cork Podcastfestival.com. Go there, and there is a massive lineup. Like, some of the bigger podcasts that are going to be a part of this festival are the West Cork Podcast, the Blind Boy Podcast, the Alison Spittle Show, County Vinyl are doing one in the Kino, Ask Audrey, Those Conspiracy Guys, loads more. Mother of God, Just Me, Claire Sands and Junior Brother are doing a podcast with the Irish Music Industry Podcast in the Kino as well. I'm definitely going to be going to that one there. And Niler 9 is going to be there. The Critter Shed and Mother Folklore is in the Spalbeen Fannock as well. And I'm going to be there at 2:30 in the Spalbeen Fannock. My guest on that show is going to be Jennifer Higgins, who has set up the women's yoga and circus hub in Gaza. So we're going to have a lot of common ground to talk about there and get the chats on the go about Palestine and hear more about her project, and hopefully we'll be able to compare some notes on our separate projects that we have on the go over in Palestine. So check all that out and come along. And just as a final little thing before we get stuck into the chat with Calvin, thanks a million to everyone who's been supporting the podcast on Patreon. If you want to do that yourself, then you can go to patreon.com and find the Rebel Matters podcast, or you can just go to rebelmatters.ie and the link is there where you can become a monthly patron to the Rebel Matters podcast and help cover the cost of the production of these wee episodes. And also thanks a million to everybody who's been messaging into the Instagram page, which is the main sort of social media that I'm using for the Rebel Matters podcast. A few people have been messaging in to find out when the next episode is going to be coming out, and this is it. There's going to be an episode for the next 3 or 4 weeks for sure. Also, I want to try and keep the weekly podcasts on the go. It just becomes a little bit of a time pressure to make sure that I get one out every single week when the other projects that we're involved in kind of become really time demanding. But I've got a good few episodes in hand at the minute, so there should be an episode coming out every week for the foreseeable. Anyway, and thanks a million to everyone who's been listening. So let's get stuck into this chat with Calvin, and as usual, as I've been doing for the last few episodes, there is, after the outro music at the end of the episode, a little bit of bedtime story time. I'm going to be reading another part of that Roald Dahl's Boyhood Stories book, so tune in, stay tuned in after the outro music is on, and if you want to listen to that, and then you can just sit back and chill out for a few minutes while I read you a bit of a Roald Dahl book. But let's get stuck into this chat with Calvin James Sweeney. Tell me so much about Syrias Vibes and where it came from.
Well, Syrias Vibes is a campaign of the School Foundation, which is a charity my brother set up 10 years ago. And I had always been part-time with the school because I was in a social care background myself. And yeah, just when the war happened in Syria, because I'd been to Syria and Iraq before, and I'd been to the territories where the Islamic State hit hardest, so kind of stuck in my craw, and I couldn't sleep at night thinking what happened to the people over there. So yeah, I guess I had a bit of a quarter life crisis as well. I wasn't happy in my life, I wasn't happy in my work. Social care is it's very difficult to achieve success and get results, like out of every child you're working with, the success rate of, getting them into the world, the real world, with the tools that they need and the support that they need, it's very difficult, it's very bleak, so I just got completely burnt out working there, so I just needed something very new in my life, so I just decided, fuck this, I'm going out to Syria.
Why did you decide to go there?
Yeah, well, just couldn't sleep at night thinking, I met some great people when I was out there, because a lot of people, when they think Syria, Iraq, they immediately think this dodgy desert, but no, I had really, really good times out there. People are great. And I just couldn't, sleep at night thinking what these people were going through. So I got in touch with a Kurdish militia called the YPG, and they were taking in Western fighters at the time. Lads, ex-military lads, anarchists from all over the world. So I got in touch on Facebook and just said, look, I come from a health background and I have 10 years experience. I can drive, I can administer drugs, so what do you reckon? So the guys are like, yeah, stall it. So get a one-way flight to the city in Iraq, call this number when you get here and we'll look after you. So yeah, that's what I did.
And one of the questions I was going to ask you was about something you just touched on a second ago, about the kind of preconceptions that people have about Syria and Iraq. And I wanted to ask you, first of all, where does that preconception come from, and how did you end up with a different point of view?
Well, I don't know, because the wars are happening in these places, so I guess it's like the word anarchy. When a lot of people, when they hear the word anarchy, they think of people with balaclavas on, chucking petrol bombs at government buildings, and but anarchy's not like that at all, So I think it's just media, fear mongering, because I think in the Middle East, the people that are causing most problems for the Middle East and from the Middle East would be the Emirati, Saudi Arabia, these countries that we should be looking at, not Yemen, Iraq, and Syria. These countries, they're like victim countries. So I don't know, why people would think that, but no, they're really great people, very welcoming people, and
See, as far as you can understand it, or based on your own understanding, is it possible to break down the political situation in Syria?
It's very difficult because I was there for 7 months in 2016, and again, it was very hard for us to follow what was going on the ground. I was in Aleppo County, so if you could imagine Aleppo City would have been like Dublin City, I would have been in the Portmarnock end of it, and still we didn't have a clue what was going on in Aleppo. And I remember there was an airstrike assault by the government on the Kurds in a town called Hasakeh. And I was lucky because I was in Hasakeh the day before. We were transporting prisoners from the front, and all the acute cases had to go there. So we were back in the city Qamishlo, which is about an hour away from Hasakeh, and on the news we were just watching Syrian jets pummeling Hasakeh, and it was the first time the regime had attacked the Kurds with airstrikes. And we had to keep swapping over from the Kurdish news channel to the regime news channel to figure out what's going on. So the regime was like, we're pummeling them, we're going to win. And the Kurds are like, we're fighting defiantly, And at the end of it, the Kurds came out on top. But we were just sitting there just flicking through all the news channels, trying to wrap our own heads around it, and, radioing our guys on the ground to see what was going on. So, yeah, even the people there having to breathe what's going on.
Yeah, you're trying to filter out the propaganda from the actual facts on the ground as well.
Yeah.
So you land over there, and in a way, what are the different sides in that conflict at the minute?
Well, during the Arab Spring, it was the working class Sunnis tried to rise up against the Assad regime, but they didn't have the manpower or the numbers or the weapons to do the job, So they kind of went for it and didn't have a plan B. So then they started recruiting different militias, different jihadi groups to get the numbers, and they've kind of taken it over now. So yeah, and then you've got the Kurds up in the north, but they were focusing mainly on the war with the Islamic State. So yeah, with the rebels, I don't know, I think there's probably about 80 different factions tied to the rebels. Then you have the regime, who are backed by Iran and Russia, and and the Kurds. So
it's complicated, isn't it? And see the way we've been involved in helping to establish some things over in Palestine over the last number of years. I think that one of the things that made it so easy for me to connect with that kind of political situation over there was that even though any political war like that is complicated, but at the same time, it's kind of you go back to 1948 and Israel didn't exist, and they started taking over land, and then now they're displacing Palestinians, and it's quite not easy to explain, but you can see a fairly straightforward timeline of how things happen, and which side is being oppressed and which side is the oppressor in that way. But anytime I've tried to kind of get my head around what's happening in Syria, it seems, and maybe it's because I'm not able to filter the propaganda from what's actually happening, which is why one of the reasons I was so interested to be doing this podcast with you. But so Syria was sitting there as a country governing itself at some stage, and then the shit absolutely hit the fan.
There's loads of different I don't know, a lot of people are saying that it's to do with a pipeline that Qatar wanted to put through Iraq and Syria to Europe, and Assad wasn't having any of it. So that's another preconception, that people think that that's why the war started. And then again, Turkey, I think they were against Assad, or they're against Assad at the moment. They're funding most of the jihadi groups in northern Syria. But then I think they're trying to change their tune now, because the Kurds control 30% of the state. And since the YPG and the Syrian Democratic Forces are, you could say that they're aligned. They're not the same entity, but they have the same ideology. They're both following the teachings of Abdullah Öcalan, Murray Bookchin, and this scares the shit out of Turkey. So they don't want to see what the PKK in Turkey are trying to achieve. They don't want to see this being achieved in Syria and working out in Syria. So right now Turkey want to create a buffer zone along the whole length of the border, 30 kilometers deep into Syria. And America, who were aligned with the Kurds pretty much up until the end of the ISIS wars. It was gas, because when I was there, Obama was running the show, and everyone would call him Havala's comrade, So he was called Havala Obama.
Amongst the YPG?
Yeah, amongst all the Kurds up in the northern Syria. And, history repeats itself. The Kurds have been flung under the bus every opportunity that America has been involved with them. So I was telling them, you should not put too much faith in this lad, And then Trump took over, and he became Haval Trump. And I was the only one who wasn't optimistic about this relationship lasting. And Trump said that he was going to withdraw all the troops, even though the Iraqi governments and the Syrian governments don't have the capacity to contain jihadism in these states. So so now America is kind of siding with her, and it's bonkers that America is siding with Turkey, because it's been proven that Turkey have been supporting ISIS. They've been trading with ISIS. It's a safe haven for ISIS. All Islamic State fighters who ended up in Syria have been stamped in and out of Turkey. So it's just bonkers that America is now aligning with Turkey and supporting the idea of this buffer zone. And in northern Syria, all the major cities are right on the border. So Qamishlo, which is the largest city in the north, right on the border. Kobani, which is extremely important to the Kurds, that's right on the border as well. So yeah, we don't know how this is going to pan out. And then Erdogan in Turkey, he's just threatening like full-on invasion every day.
Is it a case that America have sided with Turkey and they're putting their sort of economic interests ahead of actually it's economics, it's geography, and again with like Russia has always been an ally of Syria, and you know, when the war happened, they were the first to step in and support Assad regardless of what he was up to. And Iraq, America, they're not particularly in Iraq anymore. They have a few bases there, but they're not too active. So Russia have shown themselves that, they can be an ally in the Middle East, because it's always been America. But now Russia have stuck their hat in the ring, and they're proving that, they're a useful ally. To the Syrian regime?
Yeah, and even Turkey, there was a missile defense system that America were threatening to cut sanctions with Turkey if Turkey bought this missile defense system, because this missile defense system, it has to be operated by Russians, so there'd be a Russian presence in Turkey. So Russia just gave them the two fingers and went ahead with it. So then they got banned from, like, they were to buy these, I don't know if it's F-35s, but like the best warplane in the world. So then they've been banned from buying those because they bought this defense system. And it's just mad, just Turkey just blatantly doing what it wants. And like when I was living in Qamishlo, there was an assault on a city called Nusaybin. It was after the destruction of the city called Jazire, where Turkey just, killing civilians. There was like a basement full of women and children that they knew women and children in there, and they just torched it. And this is well known through the region that Turkey are up to this kind of thing. And I was with a journalist from Russia Today who wanted to cover the war, but it was safer for him to go to Syria and film over the fence than to actually be in Turkey. And we were watching chemical bombs being dropped in civilian neighbourhoods, phosphorus bombs.
With your eyes, like watching them?
Yeah, we were watching it. And I have videos and everything, like, of, chemical weapons being dropped on Turkish civilians by their own government. And I'd always be checking the news, and there'd be nothing about it at all, so. So
when you land out there, what happens then the first time you got out there? What was the order of events then?
I had to be taken to a safe house, and in this house there was loads of different Westerners who were going over to fight, and then we had to go to a guerrilla camp up in the mountains, and then we had to wait there, and the lads were kind of crossing the border two at a time, so I had to wait there about a month. And I enjoyed being in this camp, there was no telly or nothing, they took all your phones and laptops off you. So, yeah, it was really basic, living in a bunker made of sandbags and, just eating whatever grows around the place. And, it was actually the happiest time of my life, that month in the camp. But then I had to come home for a personal reason. And then when I headed back out to go over, we were driven to the border, and we were dressed up as Iraqi Kurdish Peshmerga soldiers, and then we were driven through about 17 checkpoints on the front, and we were dropped off in a barn, and two guys were like, "Welcome to Syria."
What year was this?
This is 2016.
And how long were you there for then?
7 months.
And after that then, what did you do?
Well, so we were fundraising for the guys out there, and it was very, very difficult. I think in the first 5 months I was there, we raised about 6,000 quid. And it was very difficult to get money there because of the international banking sanctions on the country. So I was telling the lads, I'm like, look, I raised this money, like, how do I get it in? So they're like, do you have any friends in Germany or England? And I was like, yeah, I have a few friends in Germany, in Berlin. And they're like, right, just wire them the money and wait for instructions. So found a mate, sent the money to him, and it was like, right, you have to go to this kebab shop and meet this lad, Abdul or whatever. So he went in, sat down, the guy sat down with him. My mate didn't speak German, your man didn't speak English, and they were just winking and, you know, brown envelope under the table. And then we got a phone call that night to drive to a house up in the mountains, which was your man's uncle. So we drove up to your man's gaff, and he was like, $6,000, yeah? So he ended up just counting it out in Syrian pounds, you know. And yeah, it was like a bin liner full of cash, and that's how you kind of got money in, you know. But then when the Orlan Daknish image surfaced, remember the boy in the back of the ambulance? Yeah, we got a massive surge in funding, even though we were nowhere near that situation. But people in Ireland were just like, Jesus, how can we help these people? And yeah, our campaign was kind of live enough at this stage. So yeah, in one day we made 30 grand. You know,
after that image came out?
Yeah, on that day.
Was that like through online funding, stuff like that?
Yeah. So people just started, you know, flinging loads of money our way. So so then we're like, right, look, we can't fucking do this kebab shop, strap it to a donkey, push it over the border thing, you know, this is proper now, you know. So yeah, we found an Italian NGO who were working in the same region, and we started bringing money in through there. So we bought the Kurdish Red Crescent an ambulance with the money. And then we were funding their rescue service. It was kind of like a White Helmets kind of thing, but up in the north. And then when I was in Kobani once, we were working on the Manbij front line, and I met a Swedish Kurdish doctor who was coming in from Iraqi Kurdistan with supplies. And she was mental, like she wanted to drive these supplies into Manbij, which was still half occupied by the Islamic State. And she asked me to go with her. So yeah, it was a pretty hairy mission to go on, but yeah, I really dig this woman's mission and her attitude. So she is like, look, if you're ever in Iraqi Kurdistan, like swing by our clinic, we're in this camp. So I tried to get into Syria once, and it's very touch and go. You don't always get in because you're entering illegally all the time. So I had a failed attempt, so I decided I'd swing by our camp, and it's a camp with 11,000 Yazidis. It's a Yazidi specific camp. And yeah, they run the only health clinic in this camp. And yeah, I was like, right, well, I'm going to see if we can raise money for you. And yeah, we started doing that. And then we started noticing gaps in like where the big NGOs were missing out on, you know. So like the education is very poor. There's very little social activities for young people or adults even. And then again, like the Yazidi, if you're not aware of who they are, like they're an ethno-religious minority from Sinjar. There's about 1 million of them. And the Islamic State view them as devil worshippers. So when they started rolling across Iraq, they hit the Yazidi the hardest. So they stormed Sinjar, killed 5,000 men and boys, kidnapped 7,000 women and children, 3,000 of which are still missing today. And as the war raged on, these girls and children were coming back to the camps. You know, they were getting liberated, or they were escaping, or their families were negotiating ransoms. And when they were coming back, you know, they were reunited with what was left of their family. And then it's like, right, there you go, here's your tent, here's your food stamps, and good luck to you, you know. So no one was addressing their psychological needs. There was no therapy or anything like that. So we started a therapy program there, and we have 55 women and children in it at the moment. And then with the kids, you know, they're doing feck all, like most kids. But you know, there's no real programs in place for them. So we started an art program last November, and yeah, like you can see that's some of the work there behind you. And we're going to be touring.
Is that from over there?
Yeah. So some of these kids have never drawn in their lives, you know. And I took street artist from Dublin, Shane Sutton, over. And the guy's just a machine, and he's amazing because like he teaches, or he's taught prisoners and different groups here, and he's a filmmaker, classical oil painter, toy designer. Like the guy's just perfect. He's an all-rounder. So yeah, the kids really engaged well with him. And you know, we're asking the kids, what do they want to do, what do they want to learn, and IT was one of the big answers there, because the educational system in Iraq, it's very academic, it's not very practical. So you can go from like play school to a master's without ever opening a laptop, you know. So just after Halloween, myself and Shane are heading over with the MacBooks there that we got from Dropbox. And yeah, we're going to start an IT program, teach them designing, basic skills, coding, stuff like that.
So is it fair to say that, like, if I'm still trying to like figure out in my head a little bit, but all the groups that you guys have been working with, in essence, are either like suffering at the hands of the Islamic State or fighting against them? Yeah.
And then again, like these groups don't tend to get on, you know, because like people think that when they think of Kurdistan that, you know, the Kurds deserve their own country, which, you know, I think they do, but they're so split that I don't know how it would work, you know. So you have the Öcalan Kurds, as you'd call them, so they would be the southern Turkish Kurds and the northern Syria Kurds. So yeah, the PKK and the YPG, and you know, they're very militant, very staunch, you know, the cause is everything. And then on the other side you have what I would call the Barzani Kurds, who are most of the Iraqi Kurds, you know. So Iraqi Kurdistan, they have a big trade deal with Turkey, being its closest neighbour, whereas the other two hate the Turks, and basically these two Kurds hate each other, you know. And we're actually one of the few organisations who are working with both, you know. Like, we try not to dip into the politics of it at all, but, you know, they'd be kind of like, why are you helping these guys and why are you helping those guys? And you have to kind of watch what you say around one group and the same with the other, you know. So like, you have I told you Haval meant comrade and Kaka means friend, you know. So you couldn't openly walk around Iraqi Kurdistan calling people Haval, you know, because they're like, And then, you know, if you go into northern Syria and start calling people Kaka, they're like, you know.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's very, very strange.
They're all kind of collectively suffering at the hands of the entity that's known as Islamic State.
Yeah. Well, they both fought them. They both fought the Islamic State, but and again with the Yazidis, it's a bit strange because, and yeah, this is a perfect example of how weird it is. So the Iraqi Peshmerga were protecting Sinjar in 2014, but then they heard the Islamic State were on their way, and this is just after the Islamic State got their hands on all these American weapons and tanks. So it was decided that they would pull out without letting anyone know. So in the middle of the night, they just withdrew, practically just moonwalked out of Sinjar and didn't let anyone know. And then on August 14th at 3 a.m, the Islamic State just started mortaring the city and just started pounding it. And then there's a big mountain called Mount Sinjar, which is very sacred to the Yazidis. So people were fleeing, trying to get up this mountain away from the Islamic State, and loads of people were starving to death up there. You know, women having to abandon babies, you know, women having to kill their own babies because, you know, they weren't getting any food or water themselves, and like after 10 days, you know, they couldn't feed their babies and their babies were starving to death, so they were just putting their children out of their own misery, you know. And then it was the PKK, the Turkish Kurds, who came down and opened a corridor to northern Syria and practically saved all the Yazidis from Sinjar mountain. So the Yazidis are kind of caught between these two groups, you know, and the PKK set up a self-defense unit of Yazidis called YBS. So when you go to Sinjar, it's practically split up. There's different checkpoints. So you got Hashd al-Shabi, which is an Iraqi militia backed by Iran. They control large parts of the town. The Iraqi Peshmerga did until last year, YBS as well. So yeah, you've got, you know, the Yazidis are now split between supporting the PKK, YPG Kurds and supporting the Barzani Kurds. And again, they don't like to talk about it, you know. Yeah. Like, I'd be asking the young people, what do you think of this? What do you think of that? And they're just like, just change the subject. You know? Yeah.
Actually, I'm now getting a sense of, see, when people ask me about things to do with the history of the north of Ireland, they're like, right, what's this group here? And I'm like, okay, right, well, there was Sinn Féin, then provisional Sinn Féin set up, and then there was official Sinn Féin, and then the RSP split away from them, and then there was the NLA, and then now I know what they feel like. But you know, I guess just to go down this like little rabbit hole a little bit more, but Islamic State, like, is that one body or is it a collection of groups, or like what's the perception of what it actually is?
Again, you know, all the tinfoil hat wearers would be like, oh, you know, it was the Mossad and the CIA formed it, but basically what happened was when Saddam Hussein was overthrown, because like a lot of people say, you know, America killed 1 million people in that war. They didn't. The Iraqi people killed 1 million people in that war. So it was when Saddam was ousted, you know, the opposition came in and they got payback on everybody. So then you take the situation like in Abu Ghraib prison. So a lot of Baathists ended up there, subjected to horrific conditions. So then you just had this melting pot of jihadists in this one prison, you know, that was overcrowded, and everyone just started radicalizing each other. And then the Baathists that managed to escape, they went up to a place called Nineveh, which is a disputed area between the Iraqis and the Kurds. So the Iraqis weren't looking after it, the Kurds weren't looking after it. So this was a place where the Baathists could go and, you know, be left alone and start radicalizing people. And then people were coming out of Abu Ghraib prison. They were all going up to Nineveh. So then, yeah, they were all just getting radicalized and growing, and then got their hands on money, weapons, and then went for it, you know. That's, in my opinion, that's, you know, how it went down.
And is that, in a way, is it sort of counterforce to the amount of Western influence and the amount of Western kind of wars that have been brought to that side of the world? Has it come from that, in a way?
Well, of course, you know, like, you see how, you know, people in Europe are afraid of Muslims and hate Muslims because, you know, of the Paris attacks, the London attacks, you know, just these few nut jobs just ruining it for everybody. So, yeah, it works both ways.
Yeah. And when you were over there, how did you adjust to life? Because, like, 1 minute you're, like, here in Ireland, and a couple of weeks later you're over there.
Well, right now I'm very used to it, you know. People ask me, oh, how do you adjust? And I just slot in, you know, because I've been over like 18 times now. But, yeah, there wasn't much of a cultural shock, you know. Yeah, you hear the call to prayer a couple of times a day. But, you know, you're able to drink over there. I didn't think you'd be able to, but, like, you go to Iraqi Kurdistan, there's Johnny Walker posters everywhere, and there's an off license every 5 doors. And yeah, sure, you know, the people, like, you know, most people just, I heard this the other day, they want to earn, learn and belong, and, you know, that's right across the globe. And yeah, they're no different to us. Whenever
you came back the first time, was there a bit of an adjustment period? Or, I mean, I even remember the first time I was out in Palestine, and it wasn't situated anywhere where there was, you know, like active like conflict there, where people were fighting against each other, like physically at that time. But I remember even the couple of weeks I spent there, when I came back and I was sitting down at Cork, I thought, right, back on Saturday, take Sunday off, go back to work on Monday.
Yeah.
And it just wasn't able to function for a few weeks because it was just, everything had just settled in. When you're over there, you're like going around to meet different people, going from place to place, just trying to take everything in. But then when I got back, I remember the minute I was sitting in my bedroom, just sitting on an armchair, and like, what the fuck? I was like, it all just started sinking in. Did you have that kind of an experience when you came back?
Yeah, like, so when I finally, because it took me 2 months to get out, because I'd signed up for 6 months, and then it got really hairy, and like, I'd been declared missing because I was out of the loop for 2 weeks, so everyone thought I'd been kidnapped. And then there was a massive suicide bombing in the city where I lived, and I was on RT News reporting from it, and my family, God love them, were watching it. So they're like, Jesus, get out of there, will you? So I was like, right, I think I've done enough. I'm going to try and get out of here. So went back to the lads, and my boss took me back to the YPG lads who got me in. They're like, right, your man wants to go home. And the dude's like, when did you get here? And I was like, 4 months ago. He's like, well, you've 6 months, don't you? I was like, yeah. He's like, I'll see you in 2 months then. I was like, fuck, you know. And then it just got fucking really hairy, out, like mental hairy after that. So yeah, when I finally got home, I flew to Dusseldorf first, and I remember just getting off the plane, and, you know, feeling that cool European air. And then I got outside, and I was waiting for a train to Berlin, and then I saw a woman in a burqa walking by, and I was just kind of like, got a little bit nervous around. I don't know, it was really, really strange, you know. But then, I just ended up going on a bit of a week-long bender in Berlin, then to Barcelona, then to London, and then home. But, you know, since I came home, I hit the ground running with the campaign and haven't really stopped. So I didn't actually get a holiday into me until last year. So I didn't have a holiday for about 30 months. Went to Portugal for a week. And, didn't know what to do with myself when I was out there. But no, I'm too busy to think about it, really.
Yeah, whenever things were getting hairy out there, like, what's, for as much as you're able to talk about it, like, what was the experience like then?
It's weird, you know, because I remember not a lot happened in the first few months, and then in April, there was still some regime troops based in Comishlo City, so they were in charge of the airport and in charge of government buildings. So I think some Kurds drove through a regime checkpoint, and they were like, "You have to stop," and your man's like, "Blow me." So they opened up and just started shooting each other, and then the whole city went tits up for 3 days. So I'd never been in anything like that before, and so we were, you know, as first responders, we were, you know, responded to this. So we were, while everyone was tailing it that way, we were going towards it. And I remember just looking at lads just firing rockets down the street, and, you know, machine gun fire coming up our way, and, you know, but being able to handle it, you know. And, you know, I remember when it ended after 3 days, I went into my bedroom, and there was 3 bunks. So there was my boss in the far corner and his bodyguard in the other corner, and the two of them are just watching, you know, the battle on their phones. I was like, Jesus, lads, it's over, come on. So I remember just lying down in the bed in between them, and I can just hear like coming off their phones. So I was just like, fuck, you know. So stuck on my headphones, and I was like, sure, what will I listen to? So I put on music in the streets by Unlimited Touch, and I just lay there and I just started crying, you know. So yeah, just when you're under fire, you know, you don't have time to think about it or get worried. But, you know, as soon as it's over, and yeah, when peace was declared in the city, that's when you kind of sit back and go, fuck.
See, when all that kicked off, like, what kind of, are you wearing like first responder gear, like paramedics gear or something when you're over there?
Yeah.
So, like,
but you wouldn't be wearing, no, like, because Kevlar, it's quite heavy, you know. So if you're wearing a 2-plated vest, that'd be like carrying 2 4-year-olds over your shoulders, you know. So and since a lot of your job is kind of lifting and humping, no, we wouldn't use any of that stuff.
Oh, so you're kind of running into the field to like treat people who've been wounded? Yeah. And was that your, before you went out there, did you have that?
No. You know, I did. I used to work with teenagers and insecure care, but I've kind of flirted in and out of home care. You know, so people who were like bedridden with severe disabilities, and I worked with in an old folks home as well. So a lot of kind of patient handling, which is very important out there, you know, because if you've got someone who's got an arm and a leg blown off, you have to be able to lift them, you know, where it's not going to hurt them. So that came in very handy. And yeah, I've been certified to administer drugs. So yeah, it's grand.
Are there many Irish people out there?
Oh, there was a guy called Josh Malloy. He was fighting over there, and he received a bit of media attention because when you're leaving Syria to go back into Iraq, because you get like a month's visa, and if you're 6 months in Syria, that means you've overstayed your visa in Iraq by 5 months, and you've got to get from one end of the Kurdish region to the other through dozens of checkpoints without someone actually flipping through your passport. And himself and 2 English lads got caught, so they were arrested and they were locked up for 2 or 3 weeks. So then, you know, the Irish media really picked up on that. And yeah, it was terrible because he'd been in the British Army. I think he grew up in England, so he joined the British Army. So, you know, the journal comments, I know it's the toilet bowl of opinion.
It literally is.
But, you know, the absolute shit he was given, a fucking traitor and all this, you know.
Traitor to who?
Oh, fuck him, let him rot over there and all this. You know, it was really bananas that people were reacting this way to him being over there. But no, he was a great guy, and he did 2 tours over there. So when I was coming in, he was on his way out, and that's when he got caught, you know. But there's been a couple of other Irish lads out, all fighting. There's been no one in a civilian or a medical capacity. So there was a guy from Cork, and there was a dude who was in the Irish Army who took a career break and went over, and I think he was in trouble when he got back, you know. So yeah, they were the only kind of Irish lads out
Have
there.
you received any negative attention for the work that you've been doing out there?
Me? Yeah, well, you get the odd trolling, kind of, you know, what about the homeless and all that? And, you know, you're usually getting this off people who do nothing for nobody, you know. So, I remember one guy he went onto my Instagram, and then just every photo, he was like, wanker, fucking, meh. And it's like, well, what are you doing? I'd love to kind of help you in what you're doing for people. So what are you doing? You know, tumbleweed, you know.
Yeah.
So yeah, you're always going to get the Gemma O'Doherty fucking spanners, you know.
Yeah. So what's the crack at the minute? Like, what are you doing? What are you working on?
Well, yeah, we've got a lot of events coming up. We have one tomorrow. It's our annual donor meeting. So anyone who's a regular donor, we kind of invite them. It's in Third Space in Smithfield, and, you know, a few drinks, bit of food, kind of tell them what we've done the last 12 years, where we're at now, what we're planned for the next 12 months, sorry. And we have our 10th birthday in Lost Lane on October 26th, and then we're doing a gig in the Well on the 23rd, and then our Christmas party in the Big Romance on the 20th of December. And we're putting out an album as well, so because we basically raise all our money through events. So just putting on gigs, art auctions and stuff. So we've got a double vinyl album that's being pressed by Dublin Vinyl with 16 tracks on it. So it's like hip hop, electronic stuff, folk music, bit of everything on it. So so that's our fundraising for the next couple of months. And yeah, we're going to keep going with this art program. And this tech program it's kind of endless. We're kind of partnering up now with DCU and with some people in Google. Just to deliver this kind of self-learning, remote teaching program. So yeah,
that's one thing that I was at the Christmas party last year over in London, and that was the first kind of like time that I've kind of like came across what you guys were doing. But one thing that struck me ever since then is that like a lot of the fundraising it's based around like art, basically, isn't it? Like, and like different forms of like paintings, music. Yeah.
You know, like we've had so many amazing artists. You know, like I remember we did a comedy gig. Emmett Kerwin did his first stint at stand up at it. He was pretty gas. And then we had Foil Arms and Hog play to a room of about 40 people. And that Emmett Kerwin gig as well, we had James Vincent McMorrow was the halftime show at it. And even in art, like we do auctions every year, and we're aiming to do one again next year. And we've had, you know, Jim Fitzpatrick, Mazer, Conor Harrington originals. Just the best Ireland has to offer. So like the arts community has been detrimental to they've been just amazing for us.
So obviously, like, people are, what you're doing and what Scoop is doing and Syrias Vibes, like, is resonating with people. And it seems like, even from talking to you now, like what you're kind of like engaged in when you're here is to kind of join the dots for people, to try and get them engaged in what you're doing and understand. Like, so how is that happening? Because it is such a complex situation. Like, how do you go to someone and say, right here, we've got this event, I want you to support it? Like, what is it in their head? Like, I know, for example, that when we had the Gym Jam last year to raise money for the gym in the West Bank, I think that what makes people have a connection was the personal relationship that they had with myself and Alex, who were organising it. The fact that there's going to be a brick and mortar thing out there, and they trust that the money's going straight into what we say it's going to. Like, what's the equivalent of that for you guys?
Well, again, it's just a matter of asking, ye shall receive, you know. So we just get in touch with people and go, here, look, this is what we're doing, do you want to help us? And the response has been overwhelming.
And you've mentioned like Dropbox and Google, and how come you've got them on side? In that, is this kind of like
Yeah, well, we have friends in Google. So, and again, Google have been great. Like they encourage their employees to volunteer and give their time and get into different causes. So Google will support their employees in that situation. So yeah, we just had a couple of friends in there who connected us with some other people, and yeah, you know, we just have some really great people getting behind us.
Yeah.
And with Dropbox, a friend of mine works there, just got in touch with me saying, you know, I hear you're doing this, do you need this and that? It's like, yes, we do. So yeah, sometimes these things just fall in our laps, and yeah, and as I said, just ask. Like, just drop someone an email and you'd be surprised.
That's one thing that I've noticed over the last couple of years, is that once people are asked, and if they have like a clear understanding as much as possible of what the thing is for, that they're always willing to help. Was that an Irish thing or something, that we kind of connect with causes or something like that?
Yeah. And again, you know, people get affected by, you know, the absolute state of the world, and they want to help and they don't know how to help. So, you know, you approach a painter and go, well, look, we're doing this. If you give us a painting, we can do this with it and make this happen. And yeah,
when your
response has been great.
Back here, do you keep in touch with what's happening over there through, like, are you in contact with them over there at all times?
Yeah, constantly.
Like, do you have like particular people that are over there that are kind of keeping track of like what's happening with their families and stuff? Is that the way the communication goes, or?
Yeah. But like, yeah, we're involved in a couple of different projects and a couple of different situations, and you know, with the situations out there, they kind of morph from, you know, one thing into the next. You know, like everyone thought, you know, once the Islamic State was finished with territorially, and that, you know, it'll be sunshine and lollipops, but that's clearly not the case. You know, so once one thing is wrapped up, some other bullshit happens, and it just keeps morphing into something else.
Even a thing like, even when the heat of the battle has passed, there's like the aftermath of what's left behind, which seems to be a lot of the place where you guys are doing a lot of work with the kids, with the art.
Yeah, and again, it's creating big problems for us because, you know, back in the height of the ISIS wars, it was very black and white. You know, if you were in the green zone, you were mostly grand. You know, there'd be the odd car bomb, the odd suicide bomb and stuff like that. But now that the Islamic State is dismantled, these people have just blended back into society, so they're everywhere. Yeah. So yeah, you can't really, like, I was in a place called Deir ez-Zor last year in Syria, which was the last ISIS stronghold, and the nurses, you know, when they were getting out of the ambulance, you know, pulling Glocks out of their handbags and cocking them, and they're like, don't fucking trust anybody here, everyone here is ISIS, you know. And it was pretty nuts to be. And then I was like, yeah, can I go to the shop, you know? And your one's like, yeah, the shop's just there, love, you know. And then we were trying to find our way back to Hasake. On the road to Hasake, we kind of got a bit lost, so we pulled over to a garage, and there was these two clean shaven mechanics working on this car, and we're like, sorry bros, do you know where the road to Hasake is? So your man's like, yeah, turn around here. He's like, see that second road there? Yeah, take the second road and go down the very bottom of it, and that'll bring you there. So we're like, yeah, cool. He's like, second road, not the first, the second. And we're like, cool. He's like, second. We're like, yeah, we got it. So we start driving down, and your one's like, that was a bit shady, you know. So these two old boys are walking up. So we pulled over, and we're like, sorry mate, is the second road here to Hasake? And they're like, no, that's the fucking ISIS fucking down there. Don't go down that road, you know. So these lads just tried to shop us to ISIS, you know. And like, had we not stopped, asked these old boys where we were going, like, we
wouldn't be having this conversation now.
Heads would be rolling.
What's the refugee situation like over there at the minute?
It's pretty bad. Like, we're working with the Yazidis in Iraqi Kurdistan, so there's 24 to 28 camps, 300,000 displaced people, and in our camp there's 11,000. They've been there 5 years, and it's pretty hopeless because they don't feel safe enough to go home. The young people don't want to go home. A lot of people don't want to go home because when they were attacked by their neighbours, so they don't trust Arabs. Like, it's gas. Like, even the kids, we were watching Liverpool, and they were like, oh, we don't like Mo Salah. It's like, why not? They're like, he's an Arab. And I was like, yeah, but Mane's an Arab as well. He's like, oh no, he's different. He's an African Muslim. He's not an Arab, like, you know. So the kids, like, they just, like, there's been 74 genocides on the Yazidi people in their history, and all by Muslims, you know. So they don't want to go home. They don't want to stay in the camps. They want to go to Europe, Australia, Canada, because they have to kind of stay where there's Yazidi communities because they're not able to marry in or marry out. Like they can't marry Muslims or Christians, or even there's like a 4 caste system in the Yazidis that you can't marry out of your caste, you know. So they tend to stay in clusters whenever they migrate.
Are the camps kind of tent camps at the moment? Yeah. So people living in tents for the last 5
years. Yeah. And you know yourself, you know, if you got a body and soul, come Monday morning, you've had enough of it, you know. Yeah. So it's pretty bleak. The education system is pretty bleak. Kids only go to school for 3 hours a day. And in this camp, like I remember the first time I went, there was 2 or 3 off licenses in it. Now there's about 15, you know. So alcoholism will be a big problem. And again, just from what the people have been through, you know, it's mental. Like what happened to the Yazidi, and everyone's got a story. Everyone's been deeply affected by it. You've got people who's, you know, have lost their whole families. They don't know where their children are, their mothers are, you know. So it's pretty.
Who runs those camps? Like, who's in charge of them?
The UNHCR.
Yeah. So is the plan for them, as much as you can have a plan in that situation, to be able to help people to go home again, or is it
well, they're trying to put pressure on them, but I was supposed to visit Sinjar there because we were going to build a maternity clinic there, so we did a big fundraiser there, the last art auction we did, and so we got permission to go there, and then the day before we went, 10 suicide bombers rolled through the city. So 4 managed to detonate themselves, 3 were killed, and then there's 3 still at large. So there's a sleeper cell, alive and well, in Sinjar at the moment, you know, so our permission got revoked. And there's been, you know, sporadic clashes not far from Sinjar. There's been abductions not far as well. So, you know, it's definitely not safe for them to go home, and you know they don't feel safe enough to go there. So,
like, has there been any period in time when you've been out there and you're just like, fuck, what am I doing out here? Like, I'm going to die. Like, what was I thinking?
Yeah, but like, you know, you put your faith in the team around you. You know, these lads know what they're doing. They've been at it long enough. But the closest I came to getting killed was actually at a funeral. So they do mass funerals for the fighters, you know. So I think it was about 8 guys having this funeral together. So you know, all the women, the wailers, you know, the criers, so they're all doing all this, and then all the lads were just spraying AK-47s into the sky. So there was this young lad, he was about 18, you know, this YPG lad, and he had it in one arm, you know. So he's like, busy Kurdistan, and then he starts firing his gun, but his arm is getting lower and lower and lower. So he ends up like nearly putting one through my head. Like he put one, it missed my head by about 4 inches, you know. So I managed to slap the gun out of his hand. I'm like, what the fuck are you doing? He's like, oh, sorry. I was like, you fucking 4 inches, mate, from my fucking head. You know. So,
shit.
Yeah, but then there was another time, there was a car bomb targeting a regime checkpoint, and it was weird because we were the first people to respond to it because they have their own rescue teams, but we were the closest one. So we were in this hospital, but I was a bit useless because it got really busy. There was about 15 patients, but then the whole fucking Syrian army showed up and they were running around. There was blood everywhere. People are slipping all over the place. So I was like, and like, I don't speak Arabic at all. You know, I have a bit of Kurdish, but no Arabic. So I'm like, I'm just a spare here, so I'll go out and have a fag. So I went out and had a smoke, and there's about 10 people outside, and 2 Dushka guns were set up. These are anti-aircraft guns that you strap onto the back of a Toyota pickup, and a very effective weapon, you know, used for shooting down planes, but you can shoot it down the street, you know. So I'm just chatting with this lad, and we're having a smoke, and we hear this kind of, you know. We're like, what the fuck is that, you know? And I look behind me, and there's a van here, and there's just holes popping in it, you know. And then we look down the street, and there's a fucking dude about 100 metres away spraying an M16 at us, going, Allah Akbar! You know? So we all started fucking running into the hospital, but it's got one of those giant double doors with the small little door in the middle. So it was only this tiny little door that one person fit through, so we're all trying to wedge into it, you know, but still being courteous, you know, ladies first, you know. Yeah. And then one of the lads pointed this Dushka anti-aircraft thing at your man and cracked one off, put a hole in him the size of a dinner plate, and so that was a bit fucked as well, you know.
See on that there, where do the Kurds get their weapons from?
That's a good question. America would have supplied the Iraqi Kurds anyway, you know. But yeah, the Syrian Kurds, I'm not so sure because, you're never more than 4 inches away from an AK-47 in northern Syria. So yeah, I was actually just thinking that myself.
So the AK-47s have to come from Russia, do they? Eventually,
like they'd be all like Polish, Chinese, Czech, you know, all the former bloc countries. But yeah, it's Russian weapons, you know. So the sniper rifle will be the Dragunov, and the RPGs will be everything's Russian. Yeah,
yeah.
Heavy machine guns, Bixies and stuff like that. Yeah, all Russian.
When are you heading back out there?
In 4 weeks. But I might be going to Syria. I have to maybe look at an orphanage over there. But yeah, we're just going back to focus on this tech program, get that up and running.
It seems like you have a lot of different areas on the go, like with the technology and
art.
And like, how do you keep control of it? Is like someone like sitting there going, right, this on this trip, this is what we're doing? Or is that you? Or like,
yeah, it's me. Yeah. Well, no, like our team is kind of expanded because it's just myself and my brother, and it's again for 2 lads who aren't getting any government funding. It's really hard because like we're trying to, you know, come up with these projects, deliver these programs. And then we're back here doing all the administration stuff for the charity regulators. We're trying to, you know, keep our social media going. Organising the events, which, you know, there's so much work goes into all of that. Yeah, so we're pretty burnt out at this moment in time.
So on the Scoop team, like how many people are there?
Well, we have 2 ladies have just gotten in touch with us, Karen and Rebecca, and they're fantastic, you know, so they're just volunteering their time with us, and they're just absolute machines, and we're very grateful for them. And we've now got a couple of interns starting, and then we're linking in with TUD to do our social media for us as well. So yeah, I think just in the last couple of weeks we've managed to go from just myself and my brother and a couple of volunteers who dig out at events. So yeah, we've got about 10 to 14 people kind of coming on board now, all on a voluntary basis. So we're just delighted that this is happening.
And see, I suppose as far as anyone can sort of look into the future, but is there a possible positive outcome at the end of all this, or how's it going to finish, or what's going to happen, like, or possibly happen?
I don't know. I was at a talk in UCD, and it was a woman, what was her name? Margaret Wheatley, I think. And yeah, she was just like, hope is such a bullshit word, you know, because like just everything that's happening, it's so chaotic, and, you know, all you can do is your best and stay true to your own mission. So what my mission is to, you know, enable these young people to kind of help themselves, teach them something new. And it's a difficult mission to deliver, but yeah, that's kind of how I can sleep at night, because I know that I'm doing my best despite all the madness and everything that's out of my power. You know, just stay true to your own mission and keep going.
That's probably a good place to start wrapping it up. And like, I suppose that's kind of like an interesting answer to that question, because I think sometimes we're inclined to be like, well, you know, like this time next year, like, should be sweet, that'll be it then. And that's kind of like an unrealistic way of, and in a way it's kind of a version of like just sticking your head in the sand and be like, oh no, I'm not going to do anything there because it's going to play itself out. This time next year it'll be sweet anyway, so there's no point in putting my efforts into it. Yeah,
well, like, we're not expecting anyone to leave these camps anytime soon. You know, because Sinjar, since the Yazidis are an ethno-religious minority, they don't have any political sway in Iraq. They're not really represented in parliament. You know, so when Mosul was liberated, Mosul was the largest, you know, Sunni majority city in the north. The place got as pummeled as Sinjar, but as soon as it was liberated, you know, billions were assigned to it in reconstruction and development, whereas Sinjar, 5 years, place is still in bits, you know. So so even if the camps miraculously did close down and people did get to move back to Sinjar, it's a total tear down, rebuilding job, you know. So we'll just continue down in Sinjar. once, you know, if they ever get out of the camps.
It's kind of a side question, but just listening to you talk over the last hour or so, you've clearly like put your whole everything into this project. Like, so is like, do you still have a personal life, or like how do you look at? Are you doing anything for yourself? And
yeah, well, I'm terribly single at the moment. Yeah,
put the call out the podcast there if you want.
Help me, I'm a Cancerian. No, but you know, I keep things normal and still DJing a bit, more so for financial reasons. But yeah, no, I still have a good life. I told you as well, I started fencing there, and I'm kind of loving that, taking that serious, and I'm trying to get this book written as well. So yeah, no, and I have a good network of friends around me as well. So yeah.
I didn't know you were writing a book. When's that going to be coming out?
I'm not sure now, because again, it's a time thing. I'm about halfway there. So basically, it's me saying fuck my life, I'm going to Syria, and then me going fucking nice when I got out of Syria. So yeah, it's like from 2015 to end of 2016. So just the whole kind of 18-month period of me deciding to go and me finally getting home.
How can people, first of all, become more aware of what's happening in that part of the world?
Well, sure, we're on Facebook and Instagram, Scoop Foundation, and we have our site scoopfoundation.org, and the campaign Syrias Vibes, SYRIAS Vibes, is on Instagram as well. So yeah, just whenever anything happens, or even my own personal page, you know, just give it a follow, because yeah, I tend to follow it closely and throw my 2 cents in whenever I can.
Thanks a million for taking the time to fair play to you for all the work you're doing. Good, keep her lit. And class, maybe we'll come back and do another one whenever the book comes out or something.
Oh yeah. More sales tonight.
Yeah. Here, go on, Mike.
Cheers.
Gura Ced Mila Magat to Calvin for taking the time out of his day to record that chat with me. As I mentioned at the top of the show, this episode was supposed to come out in a few weeks' time, but I've brought it forward because of the real-time situation that's unfolding in northern Syria as we speak. So go and check out the Scoop Foundation's website, check out Syrias Vibes on the social medias, and if you can donate something to that fundraiser that they have on the go at the minute to try and make some sort of small positive change towards the living hell that is unfolding right as we speak. Yeah, there's not much else that we can say, but maybe it's a good idea to share this episode around on your own social media to try and raise more awareness about what's happening out there. And I think it can become too easy to become kind of removed from situations like this just because we're not directly affected by it. But the long and the short of it is that innocent people are being killed for no other reason than the fact that Turkey and America have made some sort of deal together that is definitely going to benefit only the two of them. It's going to make the wealthy wealthier, and it's going to affect the people who are just on the ground going about their day-to-day lives. And I think that kind of injustice needs to be called out and stamped out at every opportunity. So do whatever you can to try and bring a bit more awareness to the situation there, and support the Scoop Foundation and the Syrias Vibes project if you're in a position to do so. And thanks very much for taking the time yourself to listening to this podcast and for supporting the Rebel Matters podcast. We're going to be back next week with another episode, and as we have been doing over the last number of weeks, there is a little bit of Roald Dahl coming after the outro music, so stay on tuned in to that if you want a little bit of a kind of bedtime reading. And as usual, support the podcast by sharing it on your social media, and go to iTunes and give it a wee rating and review. And get in touch if you have any questions. Ach Gajin Kedarala, Acharj Gil, Kenny Fire, Agus Jockey Arla, Agus Slangafoil. Welcome to the after party at Cardigan. This chapter from the book Boy Tales of Childhood by Roald Dahl is called A Visit to the Doctor. I'm just sitting here with a fresh and warm cup of coffee, getting ready to do a wee bit of reading for you. And as I've mentioned before, this is the first time that I'm reading this book as well, so we're kind of getting through it together. If you are up for it, just sit back and have a wee listen. I've got a bit of a cold at the minute as well, so I might interrupt a couple of times to do a wee cough, but hopefully that's okay. Anyway, here we go. I have only one unpleasant memory of the summer holidays in Norway, where we were in grandparents' house in Oslo, and my mother said to me, "We're going to the doctor this afternoon. He wants to have a look at your nose and mouth." I think I was 8 at the time. "What's wrong with my nose and mouth?" I asked. "Nothing much," my mother said, "but I think you've got adenoids." "What are they?" I asked her. "Don't worry about it," she said. "It's nothing." I held my mother's hand as we walked to the doctor's house. It took us half an hour. There was a kind of dentist chair in the surgery, and I was lifted into it. The doctor had a round mirror strapped to his forehead, and he peered up my nose and into my mouth. He then took my mother aside, and they whispered a conversation. I saw my mother looking rather grim, but she nodded. The doctor now put some water to boil in an aluminium mug over a gas flame, and into the boiling water he placed a long, thin, shiny steel instrument. I sat there watching the steam coming off the boiling water. I was not in the least apprehensive. I was too young to realise that something out of the ordinary was going to happen. Then a nurse dressed in white came in. She was carrying a red rubber apron and a curved white enamel bowl. She put the apron over the front of my body and tied it around my neck. It was far too big. Then she held the enamel bowl under my chin. The curve of the bowl fitted perfectly against the curve of my chest. The doctor was bending over me. In his hand he held that long, shiny steel instrument. He held it right in front of my face, and to this day I can still describe it perfectly. It was about the thickness and length of a pencil, and like most pencils, it had a lot of sides to it. Towards the end, the metal became much thinner, and at the very end of the thin bit of metal, there was a tiny blade set at an angle. The blade wasn't more than a centimetre long, very small, very sharp, and very shiny. "Open your mouth," the doctor said, speaking Norwegian. I refused. I thought he was going to do something to my teeth, and everything anyone had ever done to my teeth had been painful. "It won't take 2 seconds," the doctor said. He spoke gently, and I was seduced by his voice. Like an ass, I opened my mouth. The tiny blade flashed in the bright light and disappeared into my mouth. It went high up into the roof of my mouth, and the hand that held the blade gave 4 or 5 very quick little twists, and the next moment out of my mouth into the basin came tumbling a whole mass of flesh and blood. I was too shocked and outraged to do anything but yelp. I was horrified by the huge red lumps that had fallen out of my mouth into the white basin, and my first thought was that the doctor had cut out the whole of the middle of my head. "Those were your adenoids," I heard the doctor saying. I sat there gasping. The roof of my mouth seemed to be on fire. I grabbed my mother's hand and held onto it tight. I couldn't believe that anyone would do this to me. "Stay where you are," the doctor said. "You'll be all right in a minute." Blood was still coming out of my mouth and dripping into the basin the nurse was holding. "Spit it all out," she said. "There's a good boy. You'll be able to breathe much better through your nose after this," the doctor said. The nurse wiped my lips and washed my face with a wet flannel, then lifted me out of the chair and stood me on my feet. I felt a bit groggy. "We'll get you home," my mother said, taking my hand. Down the stairs we went and onto the street. We started walking. I said walking. No trolley car or taxi. We walked the full half-hour journey back to my grandparents' house, and when we arrived at last, I can remember as clearly as anything my grandmother saying, "Let him sit down in the chair and rest for a while. After all, he's had an operation." Someone placed a chair for me beside my grandmother's armchair, and I sat down. My grandmother reached over and covered one of my hands in both of hers. "That won't be the last time you'll go to the doctor in your life," she said, "and with a bit of luck, they won't do you too much harm." That was in 1924, and taking out a child's adenoids, and often the tonsils as well, without any anaesthetic was common practice in those days. I wonder, though, what you would think if some doctor did that to you today. St. Peter's, 1925 to 1929, age 9 to 13. First day. In September 1925, when I was just 9, I set out on the first great adventure of my life, boarding school. My mother had chosen for me a prep school in a part of England which was as near as it could possibly be to our home in South Wales, and it was called St. Peter's. The full postal address was St. Peter's School, Weston Super Mare, Somerset. Weston Super Mare is a slightly seedy seaside resort with a vast sandy beach, a tremendous long pier, an esplanade running along the seafront, a clutter of hotels and boarding houses, and about 10,000 little shops selling buckets and spades and sticks of rocks and ice creams. It lies almost directly across the Bristol Channel from Cardiff, and on a clear day you can stand on the esplanade at Weston and look across the 15 or so miles of water and see the coast of Wales lying pale and milky on the horizon. In those days, the easiest way to travel from Cardiff to Weston Super Mare was by boat. Those boats were beautiful. They were paddle steamers with gigantic swishing paddle wheels on their flanks, and the wheels made the most terrific noise as they sloshed and churned through the water. On the first day of my first term, I set out by taxi in the afternoon with my mother to catch the paddle steamer from Cardiff Docks to Weston Super Mare. Every piece of clothing I wore was brand new and had my name on it. I wore black shoes, grey woolen stockings with blue turnovers, grey flannel shorts, a grey shirt, a red tie, a grey flannel blazer with the blue school crest on the breast pocket, and a grey school cap with the same crest just above the peak. Into the taxi that was taking us to the docks went my brand new trunk and my brand new tuck box, and both had R. Dahl printed on them in black. A tuck box is a small pine wood trunk which is very strongly made, and no boy has ever gone as a boarder to an English prep school without one. In it is his own secret storehouse, as secret as a lady's handbag, and there's an unwritten law that no other boy, no teacher, not even the headmaster himself has the right to pry into the contents of your tuck box. The owner has the key in his pocket, and that is where it stays. At St. Peter's, the tuck boxes were ranged shoulder to shoulder all around the four walls of the changing room, and your own tuck box stood directly below the peg on which you hung your game clothes. A tuck box, as the name implies, is a box in which you store your tuck. At prep school in those days, a parcel of tuck was sent once a week by anxious mothers to their ravenous little sons, and an average tuck box would probably contain, at almost any time, half a homemade currant cake, a packet of squashed fly biscuits, a couple of oranges, an apple, a banana, a pot of strawberry jam or marmite, a bar of chocolate, a bag of licorice all sorts, and a tin of Bassett's lemonade powder. An English school in those days was purely a money-making business, owned and operated by the headmaster. It suited him, therefore, to give the boys as little food as possible himself, and to encourage the parents in various cunning ways to feed their offspring by parcel post from home. By all means, my dear Mrs. Dahl, do send your boy some little treats now and again, he would say. Perhaps a few oranges and apples once a week. Fruit was very expensive, and a nice currant cake, a large currant cake perhaps, because small boys have large appetites, do they not? Ha ha ha. Yes, as often as you like, more than once a week if you wish. Of course he'll be getting plenty of food here, the best there is, but it never tastes quite the same as home cooking, does it? I'm sure you wouldn't want him to be the only one who doesn't get a lovely parcel from home every week. As well as tuck, a tuck box would also contain all manner of treasures, such as magnets, a pocket knife, a compass, a ball of string, a clockwork racing car, half a dozen lead soldiers, a box of conjuring tricks, some tiddlywinks, a Mexican jumping bean, a catapult, some foreign stamps, a couple of stink bombs, and I remember one boy called Arkle who drilled an air hole in the lid of his tuck box and kept a pet frog in there, which he fed on slugs. So off we set, my mother and I, and my trunk and my tuck box, and we boarded the paddle steamer and went swishing across the Bristol Channel in a shower of spray. I liked that part of it, but I began to grow apprehensive as I disembarked on the pier at Weston-super-Mare and watched my trunk and tuck box being loaded into an English taxi which would drive us to St. Peter's. I had absolutely no idea what was in store for me. I had never spent a single night away from our large family before. St. Peter's was on a hill above the town. It was a long 3-storey stone building that looked rather like a private lunatic asylum, and in front of it lay the playfields with their 3 football pitches. 1/3 of the building was reserved for the headmaster and his family. The rest of it housed the boys, about 150 of them altogether, if I remember rightly. As we got out of the taxis, I saw the whole driveway a bustle with small boys. As we got out of the taxi, I saw the whole driveway a bustle with small boys and their parents and their trunks and their tuck boxes. And a man I took to be the headmaster was swimming around among them, shaking everybody by the hand. I have already told you that all headmasters are giants, and this one was no exception. He advanced upon my mother and shook her by the hand, then he shook me by the hand, and as he did so he gave me the kind of flashing grin a shark might give to a small fish just before he gobbles it up. One of his front teeth, I noticed, was edged all the way around with gold, and his hair was slicked down with so much hair cream that it glistened like butter. "Right," he said to me, "off you go and report to the matron." And to my mother he said briskly, "Goodbye, Mrs. Dahl. I shouldn't linger if I were you. We'll look after him." My mother got the message. She kissed me on the cheek and said goodbye and climbed right back into the taxi. The headmaster moved away to another group, and I was left standing there beside my brand new trunk and my brand new tuck box. I began to cry. Riding home. At St. Peter's, Sunday morning was letter writing time. At 9 o'clock, the whole school had to go to their desks and spend 1 hour writing a letter home to their parents. At 10:15, we put on our caps and coats and formed up outside the school in a long crocodile and marched a couple of miles down to Weston-super-Mare for church, and we didn't get back until lunchtime. Church going never became a habit with me. Letter writing did. Here is the very first letter I wrote from St. Peter's. Dear Mama, I am having a lovely time here. We play football every day here. I can't actually read this because it's in handwriting. Will you send my stuff, my stamp album, and quite a lot of toys? The masters are very nice. I've got all my clothes now, and a belt, and ties, and school jumper. Love from Boy. From that very first Sunday at St. Peter's until the day my mother died 32 years later, I wrote to her once a week, sometimes more often, whenever I was away from home. I wrote to her every week from St. Peter's, I had to, and every week from my next school, Repton, and every week from Dar es Salaam in East Africa, where I went on my first job after leaving school, and then every week during the war from Kenya and Iraq and Egypt when I was flying with the RAF. My mother, for her part, kept every one of these letters, binding them carefully in neat bundles with green tape. But this was her own secret. She never told me she was doing it. In 1967, when she knew she was dying, I was in hospital in Oxford having a serious operation on my spine, and I was unable to write to her. So she had a telephone specially installed beside her bed in order that she might have one last conversation with me. She didn't tell me she was dying, nor did anyone else for that matter, because I was in a fairly serious condition myself at the time. She simply asked me how I was and hoped I would get better soon, and sent me her love. I had no idea that she would die the next day, but she knew all right, and she wanted to reach out and speak to me for the last time. When I recovered and went home, I was given this vast collection of all my letters, all so neatly bound with green tape, more than 600 of them altogether, dating from 1925 to 1945, each one in its original envelope with the old stamps still on them. I am awfully lucky to have something like this to refer to in my old age. Letter writing was a serious business at St. Peter's. It was as much a lesson in spelling and punctuation as anything else, because the headmaster would patrol the classrooms all through the sessions, peering over our shoulders to read what we were writing and to point out our mistakes. But that, I am quite sure, was not the main reason for his interest. He was there to make sure that we said nothing horrid about his school. There was no way, therefore, that we could ever complain to our parents about anything during term time. If we thought the food was lousy, or if we hated a certain master, or if we had been thrashed for something we did not do, we never dared to say so in our letters. In fact, we often went the other way. In order to please that dangerous headmaster who was leaning over our shoulders and reading what we had written, we would say splendid things about the school and go on about how lovely the masters were. Mind you, the headmaster was a clever fellow. He did not want our parents to think that those letters of ours were censored in this way, and therefore he never allowed us to correct the spelling mistake in the letter itself. If, for example, I had written, "Last Tuesday night we had a lecture," he would say, "Don't you know how to spell night?" Yes, sir, Knight. That's the other kind of night, you idiot. Which kind, sir? I don't understand. That's the one in shining armour. The man on horseback. How do you spell Tuesday night? I'm not quite sure, sir. It's Night, boy. Night. Stay in and write it out for me 50 times this afternoon. No, don't change it in the letter. You don't want to make it any messier than it is. It must go as you wrote it. Thus, the unsuspecting parents received in this subtle way the impression that your letter had never been seen, nor censored, or corrected by anyone.